Well, we've talked about this briefly, but there was a segment where she made us all take the personality assessment. And then she kind of divided the students into groups and sat them at different tables to kind of get to know each other and discuss their personality traits. And there was only one other person on my table, and that person was... Ta-ta-da-da. That's how we met. That's how we started talking and became friends. So I was an INFJ, you were an ENFJ, everyone
That's
else
right.
was something else. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other. We are the special ones.
Yeah, we were the two outliers.
Hi everyone. Welcome to DARI TV, where I bring the classroom to you. I'm Hannah John, and today I'm going to invite you to a very special chat with one of my favorite Ewha GSIS alums, Jennifer Eunchim Choi, and she'll share about her experience working at the UN. Stay tuned. So I've known Jennifer for over 15 years, and she's absolutely one of my favorite Ewha GSIS alums ever. She's calling in from Singapore, and she's also co-founder of the Mangrove Collective, and that's an international consultancy that helps people and clients work with international development projects. She has also worked at a lot of other international NGOs such as Oxfam as well as World Vision, but before then, her first major career was at the United Nations, and so I wanted to share a little bit about her background as to how she got interested in that organization, how she entered it, and what were some of her major impressions. She actually completed a 6-month long-term internship at the United Nations in New York during her 3rd semester as part of her master's program at Ewha GSIS. I did want to give that bit of background so that you have a better idea about where she's coming from. I hope you enjoy! Welcome to DARI TV. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for inviting me.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about what happened right after graduation and how you really started to get your feet wet in the workplace.
Immediately after leaving GSIS, I had the kind of broad idea that I wanted to work for the United Nations system officially, get a paid job and not a free internship. But I looked at different ways of how I could get that done. And the most kind of immediate and very accessible opportunity to me seemed to be to apply for the Junior Professional Officer program run by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I had that in the back of my mind, but at the same time, there was a job opening at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they have a department or a team of editors who can do English language proofreading, speech writing, those kind of things for the foreign ministry. So I thought, hey, that's a great way for me to have a job, earn some money, be in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also buy a little bit of time, to be honest, to think about how I can really latch onto that big career. So I spent about a year as an English language editor with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And while I was in the ministry, I applied to the JPO annual call for applications. So it was basically like elevator trip down from my level to the UN division. And I went and put in my application package, and long story short, made it through the selection process and got sent out in a year's time to go to East Timor.
It'd be great to hear a little bit about how the organization really worked.
Yeah.
From someone who was there on the ground, and then how that influenced your next career move.
Well, I'll start off by saying that it definitely was an enormous privilege. Looking in hindsight, as a foreigner, to be given a well-paying job, to make a difference, although that sounds cliche, in someone else's country, I think you always approach that with a huge sense of gratitude, and also knowing what kind of power you bring with that kind of appointment and how that's perceived by the country in which you're working and their local leaders, national governments, etc., etc. So it was amazing in that sense that being with the UN system gave you so much access. I was meeting with government ministers when I was like a 26, 27-year-old in very big meetings with the whole kind of development sector within that country, the international financial institutions, bilateral donors, civil society, you name it all. So it was amazing exposure. And again, like how often do you have the opportunity to actually contribute to a country's modern history in a very tangible way? So in that way, it was definitely everything I thought it would be and even more. But on the flip side, if you start out with, I'm going to change the world, and you think this is the best place to be able to do that, and you assume that everyone else in the organization is like you, that's when you're really setting yourself up for a rude awakening. So I went through some of the trials and errors of being a 20-something young woman, ambitious, very driven, yet finding herself in a very bureaucratic system, very traditional in some of its approaches, multicultural being an asset, but also being a vice in that certain, biases, discrimination still do persist. So I'd say the organization and its ideals were amazing, but the people you meet along the way, it's a bit of a hit and miss. I found some really amazing, inspirational people, but equally, I found a lot of people who were basically mercenaries, and they just thought of it as a career, a well-paying career, and nothing much more, which was a bit of a rude awakening for a very young idealist like myself. So I wouldn't trade that experience for the world, and I have to say again, it was a great privilege, but I think it also made me realize how there is also a limitation to doing something for national development only at the kind of top governmental level. So development in itself, you have to approach it through so many different angles. So working at the national kind of macro level, of course, is key. But most often the case is that whatever good intentions get decided at the top never really filtrate to the bottom. And all the great policies and funding to implement those policies and do amazing things never happen because that doesn't reach to that remote village 100 kilometers away. And that's the perennial issue with development everywhere you go. So I think because of that, I've also had a desire then to approach development from the other side, meaning looking more into how things work really at the very basic community level, at the village level.
Looking back, I'm sure that while you were a master's student within the Graduate School of International Studies, there were some things that have proven to be helpful, hopefully, in the work that you're doing, previously, but also in the work that you're doing now. And so I wonder, just if you're in the shoes of a student right now who's navigating graduate school studies, what are some of the things that you might suggest in terms of, how best to make the most of the program while they're there?
Yeah, I don't think it's just like one or two things, but there were a whole host of things that I really benefited from being in GSIS. And again, mind you, this was like in 2003. So, oh my goodness, do I feel old? So it was quite a while ago, and that kind of gives me a sense of the history of the program now and how far it's come. I couldn't really shout out big and loud enough how very supportive the professors have always been. And having come out of a pretty large bachelor's program also from Ewha, where there's quite a bit of anonymity and a bit of a disconnect between students and professors unless you're really, really involved in something, I found the very kind of homey atmosphere at GSIS really important. And I can't, credit just one professor who had a really big impact on my then student life. Some of them are not there anymore. Some of them have moved on, but many of them are still there. So yeah, I think just having them around as mentors, as encouragers, I got so much from that. And other things that could be taken advantage of were, like I've mentioned, the ability to spend time doing your internship rather than taking classes. I think that was a huge one. I can't recommend that enough, especially because it has a direct link to your job prospects after graduating. Having a bit of working experience always helps. I think I really honed my writing skills during my MA classes and the kind of reports I had to write, and which was of course of huge use when I started my career with the UN system. So yeah, those are just some of the things that come to mind.
So it'd be great if maybe you could provide a couple of words of encouragement to those who are currently students or maybe young professionals who are starting to get their career started.
I'll try to avoid the world is your oyster type of encouragement, although that's the easiest one to bring up at such short notice. But the first encouragement is that we just need to be really very deeply grateful that whatever our background and situation is, the fact of the matter is you've had the privilege of studying for 2 years in a great academic institution that's equipping you with various skills and experiences that set you up for the next phase of your life. So I think the mistake we often make as younger people is that our eyes are always focused on that future I need to get myself into. So as much as you're studying for 2 years, you're constantly thinking about, what do I do when I graduate? And what kind of job am I going to be able to get? And that comes with a host of worries and doubts and fears. And I just want to really encourage every student at GSIS to, as much as you need to prepare for the future that is to come, to really enjoy being a student and having the freedom of, inquiry and curiosity, and being able to spend time reflecting on what it is that you want to become a specialist in, what it is that you want to become known for in the later years of your life. And if my life story has meant anything, I guess the message is that don't think you will ever arrive there completely. You might need to keep reinventing yourself, but nonetheless, I think just cherish the relatively free time you have as a student. Also, to not work yourself up thinking that, I need to basically work at the UN, or I need to become the Minister of Foreign Affairs, or I need to run the largest venture capital firm in Korea. Whatever it is, those great ambitions are amazing, but there's always going to be a million steps in between. Even after, immediately upon graduation, it may take time for you to actually kind of get into the field of work or the specific company that you want to work in. Like how I took over a year just to spend some time doing editorial work at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but then after that finally got to work at the UN. So I never viewed even that kind of gap year, so to speak, as something that should make me nervous, or just don't think everything has to be buddy, everything in advance. Yeah, you take your time and figure things out one step at a time.
Yeah, and enjoy the ride.
Exactly. Yeah, enjoy the present.
Yes, because that's why. I ruined it. It's supposed to be, the reason they call it a present is because it's a gift or something of that nature.
I think that was a book.
Similar to the oyster.
Yes, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for meeting with me today. And I look forward to hearing more about your triumphs and your successes.
And my struggles.
And your struggles and all of this wonderful stuff we call life. And so thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. See ya. I'll do the Korean heart. I've learned this. Yes.